The Industrial Revolution was a sweeping transformation that changed how humanity worked, lived, and interacted with the world. Beginning in Great Britain in the mid-18th century, it ushered in an era of innovation, industry, and urbanization. As machines replaced manual labor and steam powered new modes of transportation, economies expanded and societies evolved. This historical period not only redefined labor and capital, but also planted the seeds of the modern global economy. This script will explore the origins, developments, and consequences of the Industrial Revolution, charting a path through one of the most pivotal chapters in human history. Roots of change. The groundwork for the Industrial Revolution was laid by several preceding developments, notably the Agricultural Revolution. In 18th century England, landowners consolidated farmland through the enclosure movement, replacing the traditional open field system. This resulted in more efficient farming practices, increased crop yields, and a surplus of food. Innovations such as crop rotation, selective breeding of livestock, and new tools like the seed drill revolutionized agriculture. These advances caused a population boom. With more mouths to feed and less labor needed on farms, people began migrating to cities, forming a labor force that would become crucial for industrial enterprises. Politically, Britain offered a stable government, strong legal protections for private property, and institutions that supported business and innovation. Its financial infrastructure, including banks, stock exchanges, and insurance companies, encouraged investment and risk-taking. Britain's geography also played a vital role. The country was rich in coal and iron, essential resources for powering machines and building infrastructure. Additionally, its extensive network of rivers and canals facilitated the movement of goods. Lastly, the Enlightenment encouraged scientific thinking and technological experimentation. Inventors were inspired to apply new ideas to practical problems, fueling a wave of innovation. Mechanization and the First Industrial Revolution. The First Industrial Revolution began in the textile industry. For centuries, textiles were produced in homes by hand, a system known as cottage industry. This changed with the invention of machines like the spinning jenny, 1764, James Hargreaves, the water frame, 1769, Richard Arkwright, and the power loom, 1785, Edmund Cartwright. These devices significantly increased textile production, requiring centralized locations, factories, to house the large machines. The development of the steam engine revolutionized power. Thomas Newcomen's early model, 1712, was improved by James Watt in the 1760s and 1770s. Watt's engine provided a reliable and adaptable source of energy, applicable to industries beyond textiles, such as mining and metallurgy. Coal powered these engines, while iron was needed for their construction. Thus, coal mining and iron smelting industries expanded rapidly. Abraham Darby's technique of using coke instead of charcoal in iron production reduced costs and allowed for mass production of iron goods. Transportation was transformed with the construction of canals, better roads, and eventually railways. George Stephenson's steam locomotive, the Rocket, pioneered a transportation revolution. Railroads connected industrial centers with ports and markets, increasing speed and lowering costs of goods transport. Urbanization followed. People moved to factory towns in search of work, giving rise to cities like Manchester and Birmingham. However, rapid growth led to overcrowded housing, poor sanitation, and harsh working conditions. These problems would become central issues in later reform movements. The Second Industrial Revolution and global spread. By the mid-19th century, industrialization began spreading beyond Britain to countries such as Belgium, France, Germany, and the United States. This phase, known as the Second Industrial Revolution, was marked by technological innovation and larger-scale industry. One of the key developments was the Bessemer process, which allowed for mass production of steel, a material stronger and more versatile than iron. Steel became essential in construction, shipbuilding, and the development of railroads. Electricity emerged as a new source of power. Thomas Edison's inventions, such as the electric light bulb and power generation systems, enabled factories to operate more efficiently and safely. Electric motors and lighting changed both industrial and domestic life. The internal combustion engine led to the rise of the automobile industry, while advancements in chemical production introduced new materials, fertilizers, and medicines. Communication also leapt forward with the invention of the telegraph, Samuel Morse, and the telephone, Alexander Graham Bell. In the United States, the assembly line pioneered by Henry Ford revolutionized manufacturing. It drastically reduced production times and costs, making goods more accessible to a growing middle class. Corporations grew larger, and monopolies like Standard Oil and U.S. Steel dominated entire sectors. Meanwhile, labor unions emerged to counteract poor working conditions, low wages, and long hours. These tensions shaped early labor rights and reforms. Social transformation and public response. The social consequences of the Industrial Revolution were profound. On one hand, it provided employment and improved living standards for many. On the other, it introduced child labor, exploitative wages, and unsafe work environments. Factory workers often toiled for 12 to 16 hours a day under hazardous conditions. Reformers began pushing for better labor laws. Britain passed a series of factory acts regulating child labor and limiting work hours. Labor unions gained strength, organizing strikes and collective bargaining efforts that pressured governments and employers. Urbanization brought challenges. Cities expanded rapidly but often lacked infrastructure. Slums were overcrowded, and access to clean water and sanitation was limited, leading to outbreaks of disease like cholera. These conditions spurred public health reforms and the construction of modern sewer and water systems. Women also entered the workforce in large numbers, especially in textile factories and domestic service. While their economic contributions were significant, women often faced lower wages and limited opportunities. These inequities helped fuel the early women's rights movement. Education systems expanded, responding to the need for a literate and skilled workforce. Governments invested in public schooling, and technical education institutions prepared workers for industrial jobs. This democratization of knowledge contributed to the growth of a more educated middle class. Culturally, the Industrial Revolution inspired both awe and critique. Writers like Charles Dickens and artists from the Romantic movement depicted both the marvel and the misery of industrial life, challenging society to reflect on its new values. Environmental and economic impact. Industrialization dramatically altered humanity's relationship with the environment. Coal-burning factories polluted the air, and rivers became dumping grounds for industrial waste. Landscapes were transformed by railroads, mining, and deforestation. These environmental costs were largely unrecognized at the time, but they planted the seeds for modern environmental awareness. Today, we understand that the Industrial Revolution marked the beginning of the Anthropocene, a geological age shaped by human activity. Economically, the revolution spurred unprecedented growth. Mass production reduced costs, created new markets, and increased global trade. Consumer goods became widely available, fueling a new consumer culture. However, development was uneven. Industrialized nations surged ahead, while many regions, especially in the colonial world, remained sources of raw materials and cheap labor. This global imbalance contributed to imperialism and shaped modern economic disparities. A new middle class emerged, benefiting from industrial prosperity. They became key drivers of social reform, education, and political participation. Meanwhile, traditional aristocracies lost power, and capitalist industrialists rose to dominance. Legacy and modern connections. The Industrial Revolution laid the foundation for the modern world. It created the infrastructure, technology, and social systems that still shape our lives. The use of fossil fuels, assembly line production, and capitalist markets all trace their roots to this period. Technological innovation has continued at an accelerating pace, from electrification to computing to automation. Today's digital revolution echoes many aspects of the Industrial Revolution, disruption, adaptation, and transformation. Yet challenges remain. The wealth gap, labor exploitation, and environmental degradation that began in the 18th and 19th centuries are still with us. Climate change, driven by centuries of carbon emissions, is a direct consequence of industrial activity. The Industrial Revolution was not a single event, but a dynamic, ongoing process. Its story is one of human ambition, our capacity to build, to destroy, and to imagine new worlds. Understanding this history allows us to confront the future with greater wisdom and purpose.